Yeah, it's an expression like a kid in a candy store. I'm assuming the English version is like a child in a sweet shop. But I am so excited that we have this here with us, all the way from Israel via New York and Orlando and anywhere else she's been traveling to on the way. But stopping back here, this is the end of your trip before you make it back to Yerushalayim. And I mentioned last night that in 2019, in December, literally just before the world shut down, we went on an incredible Israel trip with our Fanon's Kollel, with Rav Berkowitz's Kollel. And I got to meet Yehudis Golshevsky there and spend a Shabbos together. Normally Shabbos afternoon is shluch time, and especially we'd been traveling and we'd been full on, and I just couldn't leave in the evening and in the day, just listening to story after story after story. And at that time, I said that I really want to bring Yehudis to our community. And dreams do come true. It's amazing that we have you here today. We're also very honored that Rebbetzin Rina Schindler is joining us all the way from Southgate as well, because she's a groupie like me. So we're following Yehudis around. I did tell her she could be here for Shabbos, but I'm not sure if her family or community will let her. But it's really such an honor. And when we were discussing the program, we knew we had to move our Monday morning slot, because Yehudis will be back in Israel by then, but to a Friday so that we could learn together about Emunah. This is normally on a Monday.
Oh, I thought you all just come out on Fridays like this. I thought it was an incredible group that on Friday morning they get together.
So we met on Monday, and then we're meeting again today. And we're not going to meet this coming Monday. You've all got half term. It's your week off. But we really wanted a chance to learn about Emunah from you. So thank you for being with us.
So thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was very sweet and a little embarrassing. And thank you so much for inviting me to come and get to know your beautiful community. I'm really, I'm just astounded always to come to a new place and meet new people, and to have the opportunity to be face to face and not always on a screen, and to be able to just also have to keep remembering there are men here. Sorry. You're fine behind the psychological machita. So I had asked Jacqueline, what is your agenda like? How long have you been meeting as a group? A year. And what brought you together? What brought you together? Meaning, what created this group? What was the impetus for this?
When some of the hostages were released, and they talked about the faith they found while they were in captivity, I think it inspired Jacqueline to talk about faith with us, to see if anybody else wanted to talk about it.
If anybody else wanted to talk about this, and it awakened something. I explained to Jacqueline, there was a big event that took place about 2 months ago in Jerusalem. That was it's organized by Chabad Hasidim. But the truth is that in Jerusalem, thousands and thousands of people come from all over Israel to participate in this event. That's usually over the course of a week and a half or something in the International Convention Center. And in the center, it was a musical concert, and there's a massive book sale, and there are all kinds of lectures and events for men, for women. And they had an exhibit that touched me so profoundly. I tried to find this morning, I couldn't find it, but I want to share it with Jacqueline when I'm home and I can find the materials. What they did was they had this big hall, this big open hall that was a walkthrough area, and they had set up these screens, big, audiovisual components with screened and translated interviews with hostages who had been released. And these are the same interviews that you've presumably seen, meaning what inspired this group to come together. But somebody had heard, like within the words of those hostages, some resonance with language that comes straight out of the mystical and deeper Jewish texts. And so they prepared this whole exhibition where the words are coming out of the mouths of these young people who are talking about how they felt a light, and a light came to the language that they use. And then superimposed upon that were segments from our books, from our holy books, where the exact language is used without any deviation whatsoever, the exact phrasing of the experience of Emunah, of faith in a dark place, just repeated through spontaneously, through their experience, but that had been already discussed in our holy books. So because I love to be inside of the books, it touched me really deeply, because I felt like, that's the reverberation of the essence of Jewish faith that can be experienced by a Jew anywhere, wherever they are. And they just tapped into, because of their extreme need, they tapped into something that's available to everybody. And it doesn't have to be in such a situation of extremis, but it's something that really belongs to all of us, because we all share our essential components of our Jewish soul, which is a portion of God from on high, right? We have a bit of God breathing breathed into us. And so it gives us incredible capacity, which I guess this is something that brought everybody together. So you've been learning together for a year in consequence for that. And I just, it's not like I'm not interested in lectures. I'm not a lecturer. I don't like to lecture. I want it to be, if possible, a bit more of a discussion. It's a small group, or a small enough group, I think that's possible. And also I would like to be able to, it's hard, like off the cuff, to be able to show up and right away that you should know me and I should know you. How can I possibly do that? Because here we are, we're not going to have, we only have so much time available to us. But, Torah is to share Torah ideas. It's a very intimate thing, because it's really something that's between one individual and another, and we're a group. But I hope that, by the time we're finished, we'll have sort of surpassed the barriers of, separation of one from the other, and we can sort of, you're already a group, but I'm the interloper. But hopefully we can get it together and talk about something and share something that's going to be significant. Okay, so last night, I had prepared a whole bunch of materials, and then I realized I said to Jacqueline, after talking a little bit about your community, so I said, no, I'm not going to do any of the things that I thought I was going to do, because, and that's, I travel and I go to different places, and I say, I can't really know what I want to talk about with people until I actually get to the place, because I need to be able to have a feeling for, for the group. Okay, so as we were walking in, we walked over from Jacqueline's house, and I noticed this also last night. I spoke. What was the shul where we were last night? At Kinlas? Okay, so I'm in Israel, and in Israel, we have synagogues on every corner. On my street alone, we have like 3 or 4 different synagogues. I live in the middle of Jerusalem, and we don't have guards. We don't have security apparatus. In a country that's very concerned with security matters, we don't have security around Batei Knesset, around shuls. And so it always strikes me when I leave Israel, whether it's here in England, or in the United States, the extensive security apparatus that's developed around synagogues. I had to speak at a synagogue in New York last year. Very lovely community on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and it's a gorgeous, big, beautiful shul. And the security apparatus there was so like James Bond, absolute beyond. I was, like you come to the gate, there's a guy outside. There's a very big, heavy, big door. He vets you, then he can't open the door. He has to communicate with someone who's on the inside of the shul in order to be able to buzz him and it's like a whole, communication between inside, outside, it's like a double vetting process. And I was really struck by that. So I want to talk a little bit about, as I was coming in to see the sign security, I want to talk about security, like faith and security. Faith as it relates to security. Because security is something that everybody has concerns about. And I want to talk about how that crosses over into the realm of faith. What does it have to do with faith, security? Have you had opportunities to discuss this before? Okay. So it's good that I came. Since it's never come up in a year. And as a side point, I see you have a flag here. I just wanted to thank you. I really love going to communities and hearing about how deeply invested Jews are in, outside of Israel with what's going on for Jews inside of Israel. We're very, sometimes people get a misapprehension. I dress a certain way, I look a certain way, so they may misunderstand my approach in life. So I'm just going to tell you, that we're a family with a very broad range of, let's say, involvement in the security apparatus in Israel. So security is something that's like a piece of discussion. You know, it's part of the discussion in our home. It's not something that's ignored. Obviously, it can't be because of where we are and the life that we live and so on. But, you know, sometimes people will look at me and think that like, I don't have anything to do with the security apparatus in Israel, and I definitely do. So there is a mitzvah to believe in God, right? So we call that faith very often. And I want to like sort of push back against that, because this group is called Living Emunah, right? So what you have in your head, or ideas that we have in our heads, if we call that faith, then it's an idea of something, right? I'm sure you've discussed this, and you must have, right? That you have beliefs, and then you have how you live. As you see what I just said? There's beliefs, and then there's how you live. There's what's up here, and then there's how you live is across the chasm of the neck or the throat, because there's all the stuff that we've got in our heads, and then we have the way we actually live, right? And I think it's understood that there can be a big gap between the things that we believe and the actuality of how we live with it. And so that's what I really want to focus on a bit. And the reason why I brought in security, because that's the natural place where it goes across. Because let's say articles of faith, you know, things that I believe about God. Okay, so let me hear from you. One aspect of faith, something that you hold to very dearly, that gives you strength. Just one idea. I invite. Pardon me?
Protection.
That God is protective, that God protects. Okay. Any other?
Loves. God knows everything.
God knows everything. He absolutely knows. God loves. He's loving. Anything else?
He has a plan.
He has a plan. Yeah. And so all of these are ideas, right? So I can have these ideas in my mind. And then the question is, how do I feel around these ideas, especially when the ideas are challenged? Okay, so to the extent we say God has a plan, right? So a challenge to that plan might be, meaning a challenge to my belief around that plan. So we encounter challenges to that belief all the time. Do we not? Okay, can anyone give me an example of something that would be a challenge? It's okay, we could talk about it freely here, it's all right. It's not considered, you know, there's nothing, you know, heretical about thrashing through things that have to do with faith.
Anti-Semitism is a challenge.
In what way?
Gosh, well, you have to be strong to be Jewish and show that there's conflict around, it's worrying.
So you could be afraid, meaning you could have a fear of the consequences of being open and upfront about your Jewishness. I noticed it's so instinctual for us. I'm going to call you out on something, Jacqueline. I hope you'll forgive me. It's nothing wrong. It's just natural. Well, we were in the back of the taxi last night coming into Bushy, and we had an Uber driver. So, and you were telling me that your community is, and then you said, Zionist. Oh, okay. Do you ever find yourself sort of quieting down because you don't know? You heard what I said? Zionistic. Meaning she felt, yes?
I wasn't sure, yeah.
Correct. Okay, so you don't know how that's going to be received. And we were talking about things having to do with Israel, and I could feel that you were slightly uncomfortable. And I don't call out meaning you do something wrong, but it's totally understandable because you live in an environment where you're concerned that people can be hostile. And so anti-Semitism kind of is a challenge to your feeling of security, if not plan. I would say it's not quite a challenge to plan. That's a bit of the speed bumps and the obstacles in plan is sort of like, well, what if something happens in someone's life, in Chas v'shalom, in my life, or in life of someone I love, that is devastating. And then the challenge is, of course, acceptance of the fact that it's part of some bigger project that I am not necessarily aware of. All of these are normal challenges that we all are riding through constantly, and having to make use of these resources of Emunah, of faith that we have within us in order to be able to override them. So let's say we were in the car and even it's not conscious. It's really not conscious necessarily. The lowering of the voice, the kind of to cover something up. I remember once I was traveling, I did such a strange thing once. I didn't do it. I just remember now, I didn't do it. I was asked to come to the States, and the people who brought me in, they really were strapped for funds. And so they asked me if I'd be willing to take a flight that had a stopover. And so they put me on a stopover through Paris without realizing that de Gaulle is not Orly, So they got me a ticket that I had to make a transfer from airport to airport. They didn't realize. And because they were so strapped, I really wasn't going to push on it and say, you need to cancel this ticket and get a different ticket. I was like, okay, 6 a.m, I'll get in. I'll get my bags out. I'll switch airports. I'll go. Anyway, so I had to make the transfer. And it was time in the morning to pray, it's time to pray. So when I got out, it happens to be a time of year. I got it at 6 a.m. It was too early to pray. So I got on the bus, schlepping all my belongings, and I got over to Orly, nice and early in the morning. And by the time I got there, it was time to pray. So I found myself a nice corner, and I had to pray in the morning prayers. It takes a while and so on. And so I prayed my morning prayers. And then I had quite a wait until I had to get my connection. So I was in kind of this corridor. I couldn't even check my bags in early enough. Like if you get there too early, you can't even get rid of the bags. So I was like, okay, now it's time to have breakfast. I davened, now it's time to have breakfast. And I'm sitting there and I'm dressed like I am, and this was a few years back. And, France is the 3rd largest Jewish community in the world. Yes. I mean, the truth is we really don't know. Numbers of Jews is very hard to calculate, but that's a separate issue. But we'll say nominally. So I'm sitting in the hallway and I'm eating my whatever I brought with me. And I've got all my baggage around me looking like a vagabond. And what can you do? I was in a situation, that was it. And I see, like there's lots of Jews, you can't necessarily tell that they're Jewish and walking past, and families, whatever. But they know that I'm Jewish, right? I may not be able to tell that they're Jewish, but they know that I'm Jewish. And in their knowing that I'm Jewish, right? When I see that, they know that I'm Jewish, and there's a kind of connection there. So we're sort of like doing this little, like they're giving me a look, and I'm sort of like giving them a look, and it's like this. And I'm reminded of all these stories from my Holocaust survivor relatives of the Amchu, like Jews encountering other Jews in secret, and sort of like Amchu. Amchu is like, you're a member of the tribe, you're not a member of the tribe. It's like a code word during the war years. So like, oh, Amcha, we've got this little communication of Amcha back and forth. And I could also feel the discomfort with me being so like sitting in the middle of the way, eating my, whatever, my sandwich, and being so thoroughly Jewish looking, I guess. How uncomfortable they were with them. Security. So security. Okay. We all know when we feel secure and when we don't feel secure, right? We all know when we're afraid and when we're not afraid. We have specific markers of when we're afraid and when we're not afraid. What is your marker for when you're afraid? Everybody's got a marker. Your pulse races, think about it for a second. Just give a thought. What happens to you when you're afraid? In your body. Your mouth goes dry. You go cold inside. There's a beautiful phrase, powerful phrase in Tehillim, in Psalms. Libi kadonag names betoch me'ai. It's a very powerful phrase. King David said, my heart is like molten wax within my innards. Meaning that feeling of, that goes from here down. Yeah. That's, King David described it very, very vividly. Anybody else have specific sensations that they feel when they're afraid? This is a very, I'm a stranger coming in, but I have mine too, hyperventilate. Your mind races. Or I know that whenever I'm even a little bit tense, I notice it only, like it takes me a second to notice it. My hand, usually my left hand more than the other, tends to go a little clenched. Tense in the jaw. Tense in the jaw. So, okay, so we're all familiar presumably we all have familiarity with the ways in which fear becomes something that we can actually have a sensation of. Okay, so our body tells us very clearly, even if our minds are not always telling us the message, the body is always telling us when we're afraid. We just have to be listening to it. So that's why I said there's a big difference between here and here. Because a person can have all these wonderful, beautiful thoughts about how God is, he's a protector, he has a plan, he knows everything, he's loving, yeah? All of that we know. And at the same time, we can still be filled with the actuality of the consequences of being afraid. And that's something that is human. It's part of our humanity and we're affected by it. And the question is, how do you take what's here and have it affect the place of where you're actually living in a state of feeling insecure? It's never come up yet? Jacqueline? No, I'm just curious. I'll tell you, because for me, I'm so happy that for the last year that you've been talking about your feelings and your thoughts around Emunah. And now we could talk about also the idea of living Emunah, because I have to have a means. We all have to have a means of leaping the chasm between what we know and what we're feeling and how we are. Otherwise, it doesn't help us very much. You know, the idea that God is loving, but I see so many very unloving things happening in the world. How do I reconcile that with myself? How do I feel secure, right, in a world where I am constantly having challenges to all of these principles that I hold so dear? I must have some mechanism. Okay, so we'll go back to King David. King David gave us a trick, okay? He gave us a kunz to make use of. He said, He'emanti ki adaber. I believe because I speak. Now, you've been doing this for a year in any case. By being in a place where you're talking about Emunah, by talking about faith, it helps to bring you to a place of greater faith. Have you found this to be the case over the last year? Because you're talking about it, it brings up something and it strengthens it with you. You have manti ki adaber. I am believing, I have faith because I speak. I'm gonna see that and raise it one. Does anybody play poker? Nobody plays poker in England? Okay, I'm gonna see that and raise it one. And I don't play poker. Okay. You're looking at me like, did you? Okay, so no, I don't, but I like the analogy. Okay, so we have okay, there is a value to being in a group of people, or even if it's just a friend, a good friend, where you're in a conversation, a regular conversation around faith. It helps to create a community of faith where it's something that you share in common. But I want to take it even further and say that I would like to bring this into the place of conversing with God about the challenges to your faith. Conversing with God. Am I going totally off the rails here in your community? And may I speak about this? Okay, so instead of, how many people like to say Psalms? Like to read them or enjoy it? Some people connect with them, some people more, some people less. Beautiful. So they're like ready-made faith conversations, right? That's what they are. But you can use your own. You don't need them. You can use them. They're beautiful. It's wonderful to make use of them. Our prayers are filled with them, of snippets and pieces of Psalms. However, you also are the actuality and the immediacy of being in a place of insecurity and actually talking to your Creator privately. You can. Yes, everyone is aware you can? Mm-hmm. Okay, you engage in private prayer. It's something that you're familiar with, to just, I don't know, find yourself a quiet place and
We talked about this.
Jacqueline's spoken about it.
I've done something, right?
Wonderful. Okay. In your own language, have conversation. Beautiful. Yay. Okay, so I'm like, this is already bringing coals to Newcastle, as they say. It's an old one later. So I'm trying. So the I don't even know where Newcastle is on the map. No, I figured it's in the north. I mean, if you go south, you're going to wind up, outside the country. But okay, so we have, so this is a familiar idea. So wonderful, but again, it's not an idea. It's a practice. It's a practice that makes a difference in terms of how you're living Emunah. So, as a practice, we have like a few different ways to think about it. Again, we go to the place of extremists. Yeah. So many of our hostages, they discovered the practice of talking to their creator when they were in extremis. It wasn't something that was familiar. It was something that they discovered because they had no other option available to them. But as a side point, one doesn't necessarily have to wait for situations of extremis, because to be making a practice of it on a regular basis means that it's something that's familiar, and instead of struggling through it when you need it, you have it available to you when you need it because it feels comfortable. That's a big advantage of even setting aside like 5 minutes a day. 5-10 minutes a day is a very, very big life changer. I really want to recommend it as a practice to take 5 or 10 minutes a day. Have you spoken about a practice of it? Okay, so it's really, I want to urge you to experiment with it, because to make that kind of a space and then to use it, not stum, you know what stum means, like not just to do it, but to realize that whatever is the biggest challenge to my connection with God today is the best material to bring into the conversation today. For example, let's see. So, okay, so I'm going to share something very personal with you. I don't know if it's acceptable in England, but we'll have to try. So, as a child, from the time I was as far back as I can remember, I was really terrified of the dark. It's a common child fear, yeah. But unfortunately, because I have a hyperactive imagination, I could be alone in the dark. I could manage. I was my whole life, you know, I had my own room and everything, and I wasn't, you know, debilitated by it. But I never liked it. I had a hard time letting go to release into sleep. And it continued like well into my teen years. I didn't like being in the dark, especially in an empty house in the dark. Does anyone recognize this discomfort, or it's just, okay, yeah. I think I just had an overactive imagination, maybe somewhat traumatized childhood. And for whatever reason, very uncomfortable. Anyway, when I was 19 years old, 19, 20, let's say 20, you know, I'm perfectly normal, you know, young adult, and I can be alone and all that. But I wound up in a situation that was like probably the biggest challenge to my discomfort of being alone in the dark. I went and I rented a room from a woman who lived in a city far away from my family's house. I had to go finish university. She lived in the town where I had been in university. I had to go back for a summer session to finish up all of my courses. And so I could graduate teaching seminary and university simultaneously. I was a very like hyper, achiever, and I wanted to wrap everything up. And so I went in for a very intense summer session, and I rented a room for this woman. She was a divorced lady who had a big house all to herself. And she was there in the house with me. I rented the room. However, the last 2 weeks of my session with her, she was traveling to Israel to be with her kids, and she left me her house. Okay, I knew when I got to her house, I said, "Is coming a day that she's going to be leaving this house, and I'm going to be in the challenge." It's even worse than being in your own home, because she's got her creepy basement, like not my creepy basement, but her creepy basement. I don't even want to go down there. Anyway, so you understand the feeling of discomfort in someone else's space is intensified. So I knew the clock is ticking. A day and a day and a day go by, and I know she's about to leave. And then I say, "Elaine, so good to see you off. Have a beautiful trip." And she's giving me instructions on how to set up the alarm and all that. And don't forget this and don't forget that. And I'm like, okay, I've got all covered, no problem. I close the door. She goes off for her flight. And I was like, here I am, alone in the house, in someone else's house. Anyway, that first night, did you ever see any Hitchcock fans here? You know, like taking a shower in someone else's house. Like, you know, I don't have to go to it. Anyway, so I'm determined that I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm going to take a shower. I am going to do everything as I normally would, but I am so like on edge. Anyway, I've got a stack of books. I've got books for school and books for fun and whatever in the room where I am sleeping. I take that shower. I'm almost jumping out of my skin. Everything is bugging me. I don't want to go downstairs. I'm already upstairs. All the lights are off. And I have to get And I'm getting in bed, and I said, okay, fine, and I'm reading books. This is my distraction technique when I was a kid. I would read and read and read until 2 a.m, 3 a.m, until I finally just pass out. So I've got the stack of books up, and I'm reading and reading, and all of a sudden I was like, okay, it's time. It's time to deal with this. And I closed the book, and I shut the light. And it was the first real, I would say the first, maybe since my childhood, the first real experience I had where I realized that if I didn't find, and this sounds so, I'm giving you the most non-threatening example of facing a fear, right? It's like so silly even, it sounds so silly. But I really was so deeply uncomfortable. So I remember sitting there in the dark and realizing, if I don't find some way to get a sense of God's loving, planning, protective, knowing presence here with me where I am, I'm not going to be able to manage these 2 weeks alone in this house. I'll be out of my mind before I get to the end of 2 weeks. I have to do it now. So I did, because I had no choice, because otherwise I wasn't going to be able to manage. And what does it mean to like tap into that sense that Hashem is here? In Hebrew, we say, Iti ve'etzli tamid. We have a kind of, a repeating phrase, Iti ve'etzli tamid. He's with me. He's near me. He's right here with me, constantly. So, like that living faith, even if it's only to combat, that sort of like opened up this wellspring for me. I'm just telling you personally, that made such a big difference in my life, because I started to have the sensation of what does it feel, a sense of actual security and an alleviation of my anxiety. And I'm not an anxious person by nature. It happened to be that all of my fears were always focused around what's under the bed. You know what I'm saying? The boogeyman in the closet, the monster under the bed. That's the thing that was my area of greatest fear for many reasons, which I'm not going to get into now. So the way that it manifested was alone in the dark. And that was the only way that I managed to get through it. I have never had an issue with the dark since then. Never. It is not, it is no longer an issue. It hasn't been since that night. And so it's a really amazing thing to cultivate. And this is the thing that I really want to, it's such an amorphous thing to talk about. It's so personal. It's so private. It's so internal. You can't even really describe it. What does it feel like to me in my body? Let's go back. I mentioned, what did we discuss? What does it feel when you're tense? Not tense. What does it feel when you're afraid? What does it feel like when you're afraid? Tightening of the jaw, dryness of the mouth, feeling of coldness inside, racing heart. I said my clenching hands, all of these, hyperventilation. So all of these symptoms, when you're afraid, when you're not anymore. And this experience of I would call that living Emunah, okay? That has a term, the terminology of feeling the actual living presence of Hashem with me, not theoretically, but actually with me in a sustaining, nourishing, calming, protective, loving way, right? So we call this Emunah Muhashit. It's a very powerful term. It means faith that is experienced, it's sensed, it's visceral, okay? So, should we have an experiment in visceral faith for a moment? Shall we try? Okay, why not? I could be a little touchy-feely American for a minute. So I just want to suggest everybody just close their eyes and just take a breath and try and forget about everybody else in the room. This is not the kind of thing I normally do in a class. I'm so not this, but anyway, we could try. And I don't even want to talk because it's hard to do both at the same time. Very difficult. So I also get very specific sensations in my body when I feel Emunah Muchashit, when I feel that kind of living, experienced faith. And I'm curious if other people have anything that's identifiable to them when they're feeling it. Does anybody feel anything specific? Curious. You have a calmness. You know, when I came to the States, so I forget where I am. I'm in England now, but when I went to the States, so the second night I was there, I have a student who has a beautiful program, and all these women came to participate in this program. And when we were sitting there, I was talking about like the feeling about gratitude, about the difference between thinking about gratitude, like we were doing before, like what's the thought about, I know I'm grateful, I have so much to be grateful for, and actually experiencing gratitude. It was such a fascinating thing to do with a group. It was a really nice big group. And I said, you know, think about, just close your eyes and think about something you are actually extremely grateful for, not something that you think you should be grateful for, that you know you're grateful for, and just like see it, experience it for a second. We did that. And then as soon as, I wonder if I should do it here, but as soon as we stopped, I said, paused, and I said, so just show me like what it felt like to feel real gratitude. 40 women went like this. It was the most fascinating thing. They all went like they had a sensation that was here, and we all did exactly the same thing at the same time. It's very, very interesting. In any case. So we get to use our faculty of speech and think about it like that. It's actually a bridge, right? Your neck, your throat is a bridge between your head and the rest of yourself. And if you don't make use of it, whether it's in the group or whether it's privately in conversation with God, so then you're missing the bridge. You're sort of just like ignoring the bridge, the natural bridge that exists between what you know and what you are. And whether it's through saying psalms, or whether it's through gathering in a group and talking about matters of faith, or whether it's through private conversation with God. That's the best key that we have to actually bringing our knowledge of Hashem and what we know of and believe of Hashem down into the place where we're actually feeling it. Now, as far as security goes and fear, so I have we have a son. One of our sons is actually he was just released from combat duty, but he spent 2 years in combat duty, like in Gaza, and he was of the cohort that's actually probably been the most difficult cohort in the army that they've had to run, because he went in about a month before the war started. So they were just fresh trainees. They were in the middle of their training. He was activated, obviously, on October 7th, which was Simchas Torah. He was activated on the holiday. He had been sent home to be with the family. He had a time off, and he was called out to duty, even though he was in training still. So he couldn't actually go into active duty. But because everything was so very confused and confusing, they called up everybody at the same time, because they didn't know where they would have to make use of trainees for guarding and so on, while better trained soldiers were going to have to go into areas of fighting. And it was like the first few days were very, very, obviously very confusing, very confounding. In any case, that group of trainees, they wound up having a very strange experience, because they were like really thrown in at the deep end. And because they didn't know when they'd have to make use of them as soldiers, they wound up shifting around their training and doing certain things earlier and shifting other things to later, because it's like a question of the immediacy of needing them and not being able to, not knowing when they'd have to have, when they'd really be necessary elements in defense. So they had a very rough ride, those trainees. And they accelerated their training, because they needed these boys to be able to function in the field faster than usual. So they wound up accelerating the training, and they went out and they had to do combat duty. So our son, his name is Naftali. Naftali Hertz. That's his middle name, Hertz. It sounds like a last name, but in Yiddish it means it's the same as Tzvi. It means a deer. You know, Naftali. Ayala Shlucha. As it says, the symbol and the nature of the tribe of Naphtali in the Torah is to be like a swift deer. And this child has always been like, he's 20 now, but he's always a child. You know how it is. He'll forever be my baby. So so he's always had like a very imperturbable kind of nature. Like you can't get him flustered. He's very chill. I guess that's the word people would use. He's chill. So he's a very good combat soldier because he's very chill. And over the years, we've always thought his attitude about faith, like specifically around matters having to do with faith. We've had lots of discussions in our house about whether his faith is faith or it's more like fatalism. Is it faith or is it fatalism? We have like a lot of discussions around this, meaning he is so convinced, this child has spent his whole life being so thoroughly convinced you cannot avoid divine providence, meaning you cannot avoid the thing that's destined for you. And so therefore, like, it doesn't make a difference, basically. Like, if you're supposed to get this, you're going to get it. If you're not supposed to get this, you're not going to get it. Like, that's how he's always been. Anyway, so he has a nickname in his unit. Unfortunately, his unit was disbanded because they lost so many members of the unit, unfortunately. Although I have to say, they just, it's like a Besora Tova, we call this, very happy to announce that the person, I don't know if I could even call him a person, but the individual that was responsible for the murder of many soldiers was recently killed. The IDF recently got rid of him. And I know that it was like a big celebration for my son to finally see that individual taken care of, because he really had suffered a lot of close losses due to that individual's activities in Beit Hanun especially. And so back to Naphtali. So Naphtali has a nickname in his unit. His commanding officer always called him Naphtali. We're Hasidic, so we call him Naphtali, right? Naphtali, they call him Chatuli is his nickname. Chatuli Tesha Nefashot. If anybody knows Hebrew, it means cat, little Quetzal with 9 lives. Our little Tuli, he's like a little cat with 9 lives. So, which he has actually, I hope Hashem Yazor that it's, he's got lots left, because, he's had a lot of close calls. But so I want to go through this idea of like the security, right? Back to the subject of security that came to my attention coming into the shul. So there's a kind of security that is rooted in a person's experience, right? Like we find in the deeper works. We root that security in the experience of being taken care of. Meaning, to the extent that we are aware that we are being taken care of, and to the extent that we have really a clarity around all of the ways since our conception that God has been taking care of us, to that degree do we wind up feeling secure. And because we tend not to be attentive to all of these fine details of all of these places where God has really shown up for us, because it's very tempting also to be attentive to the places where it feels like he has not shown up for us. Yeah. So it can be a little confusing, because we can always point to things that where we feel like abandoned, forgotten, where we felt like we were not being taken care of. It's always possible, just like it's always possible in relationships. Anybody married here? People are married. I don't know if you're married to each other, if you're not married to each other, but okay, we have so in all relationships, not only the marital relationship, but in relationships, relationship with parents. If we're not spouses, we are children. If we're not children, we are parents. If we're not, so we exist in this network of relationships, and we all have choices about what we're focusing on in order to be able to maintain, sustain, build relationships. Like if I'm going to be stuck on the way that my sister disappointed me 50 years ago and left me, got on the bus and left me behind, and I had to walk miles and miles home all by myself. Could I get stuck on that? Of course I can. I could get stuck on much more serious things too. I mean, I'm being light about it, but we all have in every relationship endless, this list of all the ways in which the other, I don't want to say even person, the other has not shown up for us, has not maintained, has not justified our trust in them, has not, right? And then we have also the relationship is predicated on the fact there's also a whole long list of the ways in which we actually could point to in very great detail the ways in which the other has been there for us, cared for us, been reliable, been trustworthy. And in the maintenance and sustaining of good relationships, we make a choice. And what's our choice? We look at the good. We make a choice. Sometimes it's not so conscious, but I think it's important to have it be conscious. We make a very distinct choice. We choose to not focus on all the ways the other has disappointed us. And we make a choice to focus on the ways in which they have not only met expectations, but exceeded expectations, even surprised us, right? In the ways in which that they have been worthy of our trust. And that's a choice that we make because we want to have the active relationship with the other, right? So it's no different in our relationship with God. We make choices about what we choose to focus on. I like to be conscious about those choices. Personally, that's my take on it. I like being conscious of those choices. I like being able to wake up in the morning and really tap into the myriad ways in which I'm genuinely grateful for all the ways in which Hashem has showed up for me in my life. And I like to focus on it. Sometimes I could sit and not even move from it for quite a while to think about all of the ways in which I have, and I could start from conception and I could go into the detail, Shabbat detail. And I've also had many disappointments and many bad things happen to me in my life. And it's not that one is in contradiction with the other, because that's the nature of the relationship, is that there's always going to be that list of the ways in which I have been disappointed. And there's also this list that is so rich and long and it's endless and ongoing, right? Down to every single last breath, every single breath ongoing from moment to moment of being maintained and sustained by Hashem in life, right? So it's a choice. So let's get back to Tuli, our Tuli. Our Chatuli, Tesha Nefashot, Tisha B'Shvat. So our Tuli last year, a little bit earlier, maybe a year and a month or something ago. So he was involved in a very surprising, horrible, and wonderful incident. What happened was, it's an interesting story. What happened was he came home for Shabbos. And I was out of the country because I was on a teaching tour. So I didn't get to see him that Shabbos. I was in the United States. And he came home. And, when mother is home, so certain things get taken care of that don't get taken care of when mother is not home. So one of those things is he came home and he told my husband, Tati, I really could use a belt for my grenades. Interesting thing to ask your father for. I could really use a belt for my grenades. Now, this is the Israeli army. I have to tell you, there's a word in Yiddish. It's a Hamisha army. It's a very Hamisha army. It's like a very, it's homey. Okay. So the homey aspect of the army was that all these boys were coming home saying, I really could use some tactical gloves. They haven't issued the tactical gloves. Do you think you could spot me some tactical gloves? And if you couldn't, so then some nice Jews from abroad might send some tactical gloves. You never know which cousins and aunts and uncles who don't know you, but who want to take care of you are going to send you some tactical gloves. So that's a lot of what was happening for the course of 2 years. Was equipment wise, there was a lot of love moving back and forth between Israel and communities outside of Israel via equipment, okay, as you are for your all nodding. Yes, everybody get boots and this and that. Okay, so he came home and he said, I really could use a grenade belt. Why? Because in every unit, there's a guy who holds a very big machine gun. It's called a Negev. And so the guy who does that is called the Negevist. He's not negative. He's just holding the Negev gun. So it's a very big, heavy gun, and it takes up a lot of space across the chest when you're carrying it around. And the grenades are normally on straps on the vest. And he said, they're getting in my way, so I should put them down on a belt, but I don't have the belt for them. So he was home for Shabbos, but he had to be back on the base Sunday morning. It didn't work out. They didn't have time to get it. It didn't happen. So Mama wasn't home to say better to be late to go back to the base than go without the belt. So go and get the belt and here's the money. If Mama's not home to do it, so then it doesn't necessarily happen. So no shade to the fathers in the room, but that's at least the dynamic in our house. So so next thing I know, he sends me, a couple days later, I get a photograph. I could even show it to you if you want to see, of him with a friend from his unit, like filthy and sweated up, but looking like kind of highly exuberant and also very dusty and messy and post-combat. And I look at the picture and I'm like, I don't know what these guys just went through, but that's looks like a post something. I don't know what happened here. And all he writes to me, he sends me a text. He says, Mama, I had a big miracle happen for me. And I want to tell you about it. And I said, you know what? Tell me, I'm going to be home soon. Tell me when I get home. I want to hear the whole story. I want to hear it from you directly. Then on the family chat, my son-in-law, he's in intelligence. So he's like, what blew up on you? He noticed something on the picture, which I didn't see. And he's like, what happened to your uniform down there? Anyway, he picked up on something. Okay, so I said to I got home. I managed, by the skin of my teeth, to make it back for a Pidyon HaBen for our son. It was incredible. I had to travel to Florida to go to Israel from New York to catch a flight so I could make it in time for the Simcha. It was one of those days that was kind of a crazy story. And I get in and we finished the meal for the Pidyon HaBen. And my son comes over to the women's section. He sits down with me and he tells me the story. He came home and he said he needed a grenade belt. And my husband, it didn't happen. He got back to the base and lo and behold, tell me, what's at the base? Grenade belts. Okay, so there's a whole shipment of grenade belts and he's able to get the grenade belt. Why? Because some nice Jews from outside of Israel sent a donation of these belts. Great. He moves his grenades down on his belt and then they go out to do a mission in Beit Hanun. So he goes out on a mission in Beit Hanun, his unit, and they're crossing the road. And all of a sudden he feels something. When you're moving like this, he tells me, Mama, you don't understand. It's when you have so much adrenaline, it's you're in some kind of a space where everything is happening. Remember the $6 Million Man, if you remember that TV show? So it's it's everything is moving slow and fast at the same time. And he says, I look down and I see there's a grenade on the ground. I thought they threw it with smoke everywhere and there's firing on them because they're sniping on them. And he sees a grenade on the ground. He says, Rimon, right? Grenade. That's what they train him to do. And then he has to make a decision. He's the closest one to it. Does he have enough time to get away? Or does he have to lie on it? Because that's what they teach you how to do. You have to lie on it to protect the rest of your unit. So he has to make a decision very quickly. He sees everybody is still moving. It hasn't gone off. He just moves with them. They leave. They cross the road. They get into the building that's secure. And the first thing they do, because they were being sniped, is their commanding officer has to say, okay, I have to check everybody. Everybody's got to be checked. Because they don't necessarily feel it if they got a bullet. You don't feel anything if you're loaded up with adrenaline. So he says, Tuli, get undressed. Strip down, strip. You got hit. So Tuli said, I wasn't hit. And he said, you don't feel it. Strip down, hurry. We have a medic. We got to make sure you're okay. So he takes off his uniform. He takes everything off. He sees, it's nothing wrong with me. Okay, what happened was, this is my child telling me this at the Pidyon HaBen. I had just come off a flight and he's telling me the whole story. And I'm like, he said, so I got hit in the grenade. I said, it didn't blow up. You got hit, a sniper bullet is very big. It can punch a whole Hashem Yirachem right through a person. It's an unbelievably powerful bullet. He said, no, I got hit in the grenade. I said, how did it not blow up? It's full of explosive material. So he said, no, a soldier was killed years ago by getting hit in the grenade. So Israel produces grenades that don't blow up when you hit them with a bullet. The outside shell breaks off, it blows off, and the inside explosive material is encased very tightly and it falls down. It just falls down and it's inert and it doesn't get triggered. So he said, I did get a bullet, but it hit me. He only had one grenade, actually. He didn't have two. He got hit in the grenade, and it was the one place on his body that was sufficiently armored that the bullet didn't get him. So he did get hit, but he got hit in the one place that was so well armored that it couldn't get to his body. So that was the blast hole that my son-in-law had noticed. I don't know if people are aware of this. There's like an 11-story building in Bnei Brak that's filled with guys like my son-in-law who grew up in Hasidic and non-Hasidic homes, who go in black and white, who wear dog tags, who don't wear uniforms. And they are all computer analysts. They are all intelligent analysts for the intelligence unit in the army. A lot of people are not aware that that exists. Did you ever hear of that? You've heard about it? Good code? So Shmona Matayim, 8200, has a subdivision for the, which is, I don't know that people really are aware that this exists. Anyway, so my son-in-law is, pardon me? No, I don't even understand why. It's quite a large piece of the operation, but people are not aware. Anyway, so that's, very good. I don't know why people are not aware, but I know why people are not aware. It's just because people like to, foment hate and divisiveness. Okay, but it's a nice piece of information to let people know about. Anyway, so he noticed, because that's what he's trained to do, is to notice things. So he saw, Tuli, you've got a blast hole on the bottom part of your uniform. And in any case, that was last year. Tuli Chatuli Tishmin Fashot. He had a close call. And then this past summer, unfortunately, he was in Beit Hanun, and he survived also by the skin of his teeth, 2 roadside bombs that went off and killed 4 of his best friends in his unit. And it was a very devastating incident for everybody, obviously. There was another guy who was killed at the same incident, who was not from their unit, who was an adjunct, who came from the north. He was a bit older. He was from Haifa area. And Tuli, and again, here's the fine point, the fine print, okay? So one of the ways in which he deals with his trauma, I have to let you go already. One of the ways in which he deals with his trauma is that when he's home on leave, he likes to troll Hamas's websites. They have websites where they put up footage of their hits and their successes and all their war footage, yeah? So he trolls through their websites looking for incidents and events that are familiar to him from the other perspective. And I think that's one of the ways that he's been processing his trauma for the last 2 years. And he's got he's got good resilience, and that's one of the ways he works it out for himself. So he found footage of his hit, and I have it on my phone. And I want you to know how wondrous it is. So he shows me the footage. It's very smoky, but you can see what happens. It's from the perspective of the sniper. So he's got a camera on him while he's shooting. And you hear it's very loud, it's slowed down. And you can see off in the distance, you see this group of 5 guys who are coming out from one building and moving across the road. And then in the smoke, you see this flash, right? It's a big flash because the bullet hit the casing and it blew it off. Because of the obscuring of the smoke, they posted this because they were convinced that it was like something to celebrate. But what they actually did was provide us with evidence of the absolute wonder of God's protection of Tuli. And I noticed you can even see that when he got into the road before the bullet came, he sort of jumped. He didn't walk. He sort of did a little leap. And I said, Tuli, what'd you have for breakfast that day? I meant you see, it was millimeters. It's such a question of such small things, And I said, even just another millimeter, the bullet is chas v'shalom. It's it's that kind of a hit in the pelvis. You wish you were dead. I hate to say it. If you survive such a thing, you wish you didn't survive. So I said, what'd you eat for breakfast? Did you eat your Wheaties? When I was growing up. I was kind of joking, but not. And when he told me the whole story, all I did was sit there like this. I was touching him. Tuli. And he said, Mama, this is so not you. I'm like, he's like me. Very, very cool, calm, collected. And I said, what, you think just because I'm not a hysteric that I'm not deeply feeling about you? There's a lot of distance between being hysterical and alarmist and being indifferent, okay? We're neither here nor there. That's not where we are. But anyway, so it's the sages said, Ein bal hanes makir b'niso. A person who's had a miracle done for them has no awareness of what's been done for them. And then you sit and think, all of these factors, if they didn't have the grenade belt just get just got delivered and he puts it on and exactly the who's arranged where and all of these minor, what seem to be like the most minor details of how much energy did you have? Did you leap into the street or did you take a step into the street? Right? It's like it's a matter of hair's breadth, right? And nevertheless, that's a difference between life and death. It's the difference between injury or non-injury. And we have no idea of all the myriad factors that go into what seems to be such a small thing. Anyway, and even, I hate to say it, and even it was so difficult to go to the Shiva for Meir. Tuli and Meir went in before the Shiva, the last time I saw his parents were the day that they were inducted. They were really close friends who decided to go to the army together. They were in this, they trained together, they trained separately, they were separated for training, and then they re-met when they went up to the unit and joined the battalion. And they always went out together because Tuli is left-handed, like his mother, like his father. So, and they were both holding the big guns. He and Meir had a alav shalom, Hashem yikum damo. He and Meir had a system that Tuli took the right and Meir took the left, so that they had the biggest scope of coverage with the guns. And so Meir was to the left, and Tuli was to the right, and they were out front. And you can even, he got wounded with shrapnel, but you could see, my son, our son got wounded with shrapnel, very minor, but still. And you can see how, like, Hashem put them in this position where one protected the other. And when I went to talk to his parents, and I went to see them at the Shiva, I looked at his father and he looked at me, and we both had these like devastated eyes. And I said, it's like our positions could have been exactly the opposite. And we would both I think we would both be feeling exactly what we're both feeling, because we're feeling both gratitude for one being saved and devastation over one being lost. And it could have been exactly the reverse, and we have no control over who is the one who protects and who is the one who survives. And Tuli, our Tuli Tesha Nefashot, so our Tuli 9 lives. So he had 3 weeks of medical leave, and then when asked, he was given the option of not going back into combat. He said, of course I'm going to go back. What's the question? But not everyone who survived went back. Some are too traumatized to go back. Some are too injured to go back. There was a lot of injury in that whole incident. And some opted out because they said, I just can't be in a situation of doubt like this any longer. And whatever anybody does is totally understandable. But back to Tuli, who's our exemplar right now of the person who just says, if you're going to get it, you get it. If you're not going to get it, you don't get it. So his experiences have only reinforced his faith/fatalism. That's because, again, we are built in terms of our relationship with, now we're talking not emunah, but more bitachon. Bitachon in Hebrew means trust, but it's also what we call the guy outside who's dealing with your gate, right? He's called bitachon, right? If you have kochot bitachon, they're called security apparatus, right? So that sense of, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Because he had a lens of bitachon to begin with, of trust to begin with, all of his experiences only reinforced that sense of the absoluteness of divine providence, the inescapability of that which is destined, the acceptance of the plan, regardless. And so when it was his turn to make a decision about whether he's going in or not, his attitude is, well, if I'm going to get it, I'll get it in Yerushalayim by some other means. And if I'm not going to get it, then like it's already happened, I'll walk through a minefield and I won't get it. So that's both extremely powerful. Like, you can understand how, like, that kind of an attitude gives a person a kind of bulletproof way of going through life. Yeah. Like, he should be well and he should remain bulletproof, Hashem Yahzor. And at the same time, there's always, like, as parents, we say, is that really trust, or is that a kind of fatalism where it's that one also has to take account of the things that one has to do also to protect oneself, and that they're not necessarily at odds with each other. So I leave that as an open question for everybody to contemplate. The ways in which they feel secure, the ways in which they don't feel secure. How would it be possible to bring all of this beautiful Emunah that you've been developing and discussing and expanding through your last year, through this last year, and through your lives as a whole? How to bring that from up here more down into here, into where you're living, and how to make good use of your friends. You have this group, and you have, to be able to be in the company of other people who are working on expanding their Emunah. That's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And no matter how crazy the world gets, for all the craziness in the world, it's nice to be in the company of people who are sane in the crazy world, and sanity being sanity and healthy, because sanus means, sante, the root is to be healthy, right? Is to be like spiritually healthy people, spiritually resilient people with high levels of antibodies, yes, of spiritual antibodies, intensified by faith, to be in that community, to make good use of each other, to really continue to develop and grow with it.
I told you we were in for a treat, and the treat continues. So ladies, tonight at 8:30 at our home, we're going to be sharing some songs and stories. And for everyone tomorrow, 10:45, 11, there'll be a session talking about love.
Love.
It's really such an honor to have you.
My pleasure.